Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. I'm your long curly haired host, David, and let's talk about how the US President Donald Trump recently imposed a tariff on Australian penguins. Not exports of penguins, penguins! He's imposed a 10% tariff on Heard and McDonald Islands, an external territory of Australia which is uninhabited by human beings. No one's been there in maybe a decade, and the only thing there is ice, some seals, and of course, a lot of penguins. Because it's near the Antarctic. Despite being part of Australia, the White House has listed it as a separate country. For some reason, for many of you, you'll be shocked at this recent news. Not me, I personally know everything that's about to happen in the Trump administration because I have a crystal ball. Look forward to July 17th. That's going to be interesting. While Australians are familiar with the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory, we actually have 10 territories, 3 of which are on the mainland and the rest are islands far off the coast. Like Norfolk Island, which has around 2,000-ish people living there and is about 1,600 kilometers off the east coast. That's 1,000 miles for any Americans that happen to be here. Don't spook them, let them learn. Norfolk Island, by the way, does not export anything to the US whatsoever. None at all. But despite this lack of trade, Trump has also imposed tariffs on the island territory, but at 29%, which is significantly higher than the rest of Australia's 10%, including the Penguin Land. And again, for some reason, they are reporting it as if it is a separate country to Australia. It's not. I know that generally speaking, Americans don't understand geography very well. Like, I met one who thought that visiting the Great Barrier Reef was a short drive from Sydney and had already booked his holiday plans before realizing, oh wait, that's far. But like, Norfolk Island is still Australia. I know it's pretty far away, but at least it's closer than the Heard and McDonald Islands, which are 4,000 kilometers south in the Antarctic. If anyone is unsure what a territory is in Australia, basically, before Federation there were a bunch of colonies, they became the states. And then all the other land that has since been acquired by the Commonwealth is a territory, and it's up to the Commonwealth government to look after that however it sees fit. Which for the ACT and the Northern Territory has basically meant you can govern yourselves as of a few decades ago. The Heard and McDonald Islands, it's like, that's just land that we own, but no one lives there. Geography and the Constitution aside, if you're still unsure what this whole tariff thing is, basically, a tariff is a tax when a good crosses a border. This will impact real human beings who export to the US as sales will presumably decline, but for the sake of this explanation, I'm sticking with penguins, okay? Less of a bummer. Basically, it doesn't cost the penguins any more money to produce, pebbles or whatever, but if they were to be shipped to the US, they'd be taxed a 10% markup once it enters into the US. The point of a tariff is to make something more expensive, which you may be wondering, why would you want to do that? People want to buy things, why are you making things more expensive? The idea is to make them more competitive with domestic goods that may be more expensive to produce for whatever reason, like, other countries have lower wages and very bad labor laws, or they have easy access to all the materials that are required for manufacturing. A tariff doesn't necessarily make domestic goods any cheaper, but instead makes foreign goods more expensive to encourage consumers to buy local and therefore protect local industry. This is why the idea of tariffs is called protectionism. Americans can still buy pebbles off Australian penguins, they'll just cost more. So they're more likely to buy from their local neighbourhood penguins, thus boosting local penguin industry and preserving penguin jobs. Unless, of course, there is no pre-existing penguins in the US, in which case there's no competition and you've just made pebbles more expensive. Of course, there are other ways to support local industry, like you could have a subsidy or a tax cut for certain industries, but that involves either spending government money or reducing government revenue, with the hope that the economic benefits generated by a booming industry would then offset that. The alternative is tariffs, which are increasing taxes and therefore making things more expensive to try and discourage the competitiveness of foreign markets. Basically, think of it as like the carrot and stick of economics, okay? Protectionism was actually really central to the creation of Australia as a nation, the writing of our constitution, and also our modern political parties. Yeah, you thought this was just about penguins. No, you're here to learn, okay? The political divide before political parties were solidified wasn't between Labour and Liberals, but on economic lines of protectionists versus free traders. Before Federation, the colonies would and could charge each other tariffs on goods. So if a penguin made something in New South Wales, it would cost more than something made by a penguin in Victoria if it crossed the border. This benefited some people and was really inconvenient for others. Ultimately, it became a condition of federation and combining into one nation that it was written into the constitution that trade between states would be free. We can't have the states competing with each other. We're meant to be one nation here, okay? While that benefited a lot of people over east, WA actually really relied on those tariffs for revenue, so there was a concession written into the constitution in section 95. For those who think that WA isn't in the constitution, it is. We have a whole section just for us that allowed the state to phase customs duties out over 5 years to protect its revenue. Protectionism wasn't dead though. When Federation happened, it just shifted to being a debate about trade external to Australia. And the first two Prime Ministers of Australia, Edmund Barton and Alfred Deakin, led the Protectionist Party. However, the first several elections were a three-way split between the Protectionists, the Free Trade, who were against tariffs, and Labour, who were originally socialists and therefore had a different vibe going on. Protectionists could never form a majority by themselves, so you'd get governments decided by, Labour supporting protectionists, because they thought, hey, you're going to help protect local jobs, or protectionists supporting Labour, who want yeah, why not? And then eventually, the Free Trade and Protectionist parties fused to be a consistent non-Labour force. They put aside enough of their differences to form the predecessor to the modern Liberal Party, which was also at one point called the Liberal Party, but it's a different thing. Look, there are lots of different political parties in the past. If any Americans have stumbled upon this episode and are still here, the Liberal Party is the centre-right Conservative Party. Got it? Okay. Australian governments, starting with Gough Whitlam, gradually started transitioning away from tariff policies in the 1970s towards free trade ideas because governments decided it was just more beneficial to have access to cheaper foreign markets. Just like Federation, this benefited some people and it was an inconvenience to others. It did mean the loss of some manufacturing jobs in Australia. We don't really manufacture many things here, but a lot of goods became way cheaper, which successive governments, both Labour and Liberal, have decided is a reasonable trade-off, no pun intended. However, the Trump administration has decided that it wants to impose tariffs on almost everyone in the world, it seems, including the penguins of Heard and McDonald Islands, which unfortunately for the penguins means there'll be less demand for exports of those precious pebbles. But it just goes to show you that there are different ideas when it comes to what helps an economy and how to actually manage it. Well, that's an explainer about how tariffs work and the history of Australia. I don't normally do commentary on ongoing world events because that's not my thing. I just honestly took this as an opportunity to be like, haha, let me tell you about history, because I'm a big nerd. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. That's all from me. Don't forget to share, subscribe, comment down below what you would like to learn about next. I will not talk about Trump any further until July 17th. And of course, thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon. Bye.